Hello, it is on this day, July 27th, 2022, that I am talking about the different kinds of attraction, at least the main ones, and defining what they mean, having some short comments about how to distinguish between them or how to look into distinguishing between them, and finally a clarification section addressing different labels that I've mentioned in the past and also making clarifications on the definitions as I go. So, to start off with, I have two disclaimers. The first disclaimer is that there are a lot of types of attraction. Just like with most labels and most umbrellas, you can find much more. And there are a lot of people who try to find the words for the specific attraction they feel because they know they don't feel the others, but they know they feel something and they want to find that word for that. So there are many out there. There are many that I know of, and I'm just not mentioning this video for the sake of time. But there are a lot, and if you do research and dig a little bit deeper, you can find on the internet like lists of lots of types of attraction. When you Google the main types of attraction, you're going to get 5 usually. I'm going to add a caveat and say that I would say the main types of attraction are 6 total. And I'm going to list those 6. So that's my first caveat. My second one is to say that attraction is my second caveat was to say that attraction is a mental concept. It's a societal concept. It isn't something that there is a clear definition of. If you were to take 2 different people and somehow like extract their perception of attraction, it's going to be different. I can tell you right now, especially as an aspect person, my perception of sexual attraction and how I know I'm feeling it is going to be very different to my roommate, like distinction between sexual attraction and other types of attraction. So these are abstract concepts, and my therapist had to remind me that a lot whenever I was talking to her about my confusion with my ace identity. And it really helps to look at it in that way, to think about it in terms of what do I feel rather than comparing it to what others feel. Especially when we grow up with media, movies, TV, all those things, we see how other people experience things, and some people, arrow, ace, other spec people, look at them, we're like, we're not that way, therefore we're nothing. And sometimes that's not helpful. And so sometimes looking at it as, okay, what is attraction for me specifically? What is my definition of when I feel these things? Can be helpful in discovering what you feel. Those are my 2 caveats, so now we'll just get into the main 6 that I want to define. These are completely out of order, and I'm probably going to mention some of them before I get to them, so bear with me here. The first one is emotional attraction. All of these definitions are going to be very hard to define because, again, these are abstract concepts, but generally, if you're experiencing emotional attraction, you want to be emotionally present in another person's life or like with that person. This could be friends, this could be family, this can be any kind of partner, it can be people in general, pretty much anybody you can be emotionally attracted to. And again, you just want to be emotionally present. Some people describe it as like attraction to someone's heart, mind, and personality. Some people get confused if you're thinking like when you feel other kinds of attraction, if you like someone's heart, mind, and personality. Some of these overlap and some of these don't, and that is also fine. And so your definition is really what matters in this video, and so just thinking about when you feel emotional attraction rather than thinking about, well, heart, mind, and personality show up in these other attractions too. It's okay for these to overlap. As I just said, the majority of people arguably feel all of these at the same time, feel romantic attraction and sexual attraction at the same time, etc. Some of us like this kind of model of the different kinds of attractions because they're not in overlap, and it can be helpful for us to understand, even if some people deem it complicated. Salty. So, that was emotional attraction. Now we go on to platonic attraction. This is what I'm going to emphasize later in my clarification section, but I just want to point out that you can experience platonic attraction, which is a non-sexual, non-romantic desire to be in a relationship with someone. Friendships are often a platonic relationship, but you can have more than a friendship as well with a platonic relationship. We'll get into that later. Next, we have romantic attraction. Again, hard to define because it's an abstract concept, but generally you desire romantic contact or interaction with person or people. Some people describe it as emotional interest, but then there's the confusion about, wait, emotional attraction. It's really hard to define what romantic attraction is, and it's one we definitely compare ourselves to a lot other people for a lot, which can go either way. So again, I'm going to keep repeating it over and over again, but it's up to you to define when you are feeling romantic attraction. Even if it's really hard to do, just realizing that it can be different from what you see is sometimes a step in the right direction. So, romantic contact or interaction with another person. That's the best I got, I'm sorry. Alright, next. I believe the next one's going to be sexual attraction. Desire to have sexual contact or sexual interest in other people or a person, either way. So some people describe this as like intimate physical contact. I'm going to caveat that and say sexual physical contact, because some of these other attractions you can have physical contact with people. Because technically, I would argue a hug is physical contact, and sometimes hugs are intimate. So I just want to make that clarification. Sexual attraction, you have an interest in sexual contact with someone. This can feel different for different people. People like me, who sometimes are demi, I have a very different definition of sexual attraction from people who are allosexual or asexual or etc. So, up to you. It's always up to you. I know that also some people define sexual attraction as lust, and I can see part of why people do that. I just want to clarify this really quick. It's entirely possible that you don't actually want contact with that person, you don't want physical contact with a person, but you still feel sexual attraction. That is valid, that is fine, especially if you aren't comfortable with yourself. Lust is another way to look at that, so that it's not talking about wanting physical contact with a person. If that makes sense? So that's another way people look at sexual attraction. Next, we have physical attraction. One of the most annoying, in my honest opinion. Physical attraction is like, some people describe it as like you are attracted to them. You want to give them like love and affection. Like you want to physically interact with them. Again, this is one of the hardest ones to explain, so that's why I'm kind of struggling here. You want to like physically interact with them, hugs, kisses, petting, all those kinds of things are like love and affection, but it doesn't necessarily have to be sexual or romantic in nature. But I said this is one of like the most annoying ones. I mean, it's just one that I struggle to define, and I've seen a lot of people argue what it means, and that's why I say it's annoying. And then the last one, which is actually annoying in that it's very hard to distinguish, we'll talk about that right after this, is aesthetic attraction, which is the ability to admire and feel attracted to someone's appearance without the need or desire to have physical, sexual, or romantic contact with them. For a lot of people, physical, sexual, or romantic contact overlaps with aesthetic attraction, and some people cannot tell if they are feeling aesthetic attraction or sexual attraction. And that will get into my section where I talk about trying to distinguish these. One of the ones you'll hear people joke about the most is aesthetic attraction versus sexual attraction. The do I want to be him or do I want to be with him kind of phrase. Do I want to be them or do I want to be with them? Or do I just want their clothes? Sometimes it's really hard to tell. When you look at someone, you don't know if you want their clothes, if you just like how put together they look, if you like their like bone structure and everything, or if you actually feel a different kind of attraction, sexual attraction, romantic attraction to them. Sometimes it's really hard to tell. And especially to aro aspec people, it can be very confusing. So my general advice here is to take notes. Take notes. If you can't distinguish it, take a note. Like, it could be a mental note. It doesn't have to be, like, written or anything. But, like, note, okay, I felt something here. This is how they looked. This is how they dressed and everything. And sometimes, eventually, if you compare enough, you can maybe be able to tell. Sometimes, if you see that person again, you can kind of distinguish if it was their aesthetic that day or if it's the person, if that makes sense. Aesthetic can also just be like how people physically look. So there's a lot of different ways to look at this, but it can be hard. It can be hard. And, you know, my last piece of advice here is that it's okay to not know. Sometimes it can be really annoying, and I totally get that, but in the end, like at the end of the day, it's okay to just know I felt something, and I can maybe figure it out with time. Even though that can be very frustrating to think at times. So that was one I really wanted to cover at the beginning here. Aesthetic attraction versus sexual attraction. Or romantic attraction. Really, aesthetic attraction just kind of throws a wrench into a lot of people's perceptions. And it is okay for them to overlap and have you experience them at the same time, and maybe you're trying to distinguish them when they're the same to you. It happens. Next one I want to clarify, platonic attraction, emotional attraction. You can be emotionally attracted to whoever you have platonic attraction to, but you don't have to. You can experience all of these individually. You can experience just emotional attraction and none of the others. You can experience romantic attraction and none of the others, period. And that's all valid. There's nothing saying that you have to experience a certain amount of attraction. And a lot of the reasons that these different terms have been made is because some people can't feel these other ones, as I said at the beginning, and so they come up with this new kind of attraction to help explain that. There are in-between terms between platonic and romantic, and I just wanted to mention that. I'm not going to get too deep into it because I'm running out of time, but there are terms in between those two if you feel neither of those fit. Look into it. There's a lot more different types of attraction. People in the ace and aro specs have a lot more different ones that they use. Some people mention things like intellectual attraction. It exists. You can look into it if you think that that's something you experience separately. I'm trying to think. I had one more between the different types before I got into specifications. I was probably going to say physical and platonic and romantic, I believe. Because physical attraction brings in the idea of intimacy in a different way from like sexual intimacy. It's like physical intimacy, you know, hugs and those things can really be intimate. And you can be physically attracted to friends. And I know I have friends that like are just so comfortable in their friend groups that that's just how they are. They're like, maybe they don't describe it as physical attraction, but they're just physical people. How they explained it to me was that it's like, oh, what was the word? It's like supporting each other. Like supporting, like, you look great or whatever. I don't understand it because this isn't something I experience, this isn't something I feel. But I thought it was very interesting that that was like how that friend group worked. They were just very physical people as a way to like appreciate each other with physical attraction or something adjacent to physical attraction, but not romantic, not sexual, not platonic either. So it's something to think about. And this is, again, something that's okay to feel for people and okay to describe to people. And hopefully people are understanding of these things, but it's okay to only be physically attracted to someone and ask them, like, hey, can I do this? Definitely ask permission for these things. Do ask permission before you get into, like, physical touching of people, because some people, like me, have personal space and vastly prefer to be asked first, but physical attraction doesn't have to mean you also have emotional attraction. It doesn't have to mean you have romantic attraction. Something that confused me for a long time. Yay! Just because you're physically attracted to someone doesn't mean you have a crush or a squish or any of those words. Alright, now we get into clarifications. I don't have these written down, so I'm going to be going, like, just mentioning these on the go. Bear with me. The first one I have that I really want to clarify is platonic attraction. There's a phrase, you may not have heard it before, you may have heard it before, and it's abbreviated to QPR. If you ever see the letters QPR in a discussion with someone who's aro ace or someone who is in LGBTQ plus community in general, usually that stands for a queer platonic relationship. A queer platonic relationship can really vary in definition. It depends on who is in that relationship. They get to define what that relationship is. But in general, there are queer relationships in our community where maybe they don't feel attraction to each other in a romantic, sexual, emotional, physical, aesthetic way. Any of the ways. Really depends on the scenario. But they still have a relationship with each other, and sometimes these people still raise kids as like a couple. And so there are platonic couples. Couples don't have to be romantic or sexual. And sometimes these are like friendships. Sometimes these are like physical friendships where they have physical attraction to each other, but still platonic in nature, in that it's not sexual or romantic. It's still like a friend that you'll hold hands, hug, cuddle with. Don't have to do any of those things. There doesn't have to be any physical interaction between queer people in a queer platonic relationship. However, people in queer platonic relationship can have physical contact, and it doesn't make it a romantic or sexual relationship, even if they are raising a kid or those kinds of things. The reason I use that example specifically is because if people see there being a kid, a lot of people assume that means romantic. And so I'm just saying that maybe that's not necessarily true for everybody. Yeah. Let me remember one more. I totally missed the big point. Okay, the big point is that pretty much maybe the vast majority of the labels I've covered in my asexuality videos, in my 4 different types of, like the 4 main terms of multi-attractions video, and many other terms that I've covered, basically all of the terms I've covered in terms of sexual attraction apply to these different types of attractions. You will see them most often with romantic. You'll see alloromantic, aromantic, biromantic, panromantic, omniromantic, polyromantic. Polyromantic can get very confusing with polyamorous. Those are 2 separate things. Just an emphasis on that. We'll have a video on polyamory sometime. I honestly might do a guest for that one. Demi-romantic, frave-romantic. You can still have cupio-romantic, rather than having it be still interested in sexual interaction. It'd be still interested in romantic interactions or relationships, even though you don't feel romantic attraction. A lot of those terms that I've used in those various videos can be like basically translated to romantic, period. Sometimes you'll find more romantic terms than you'll know in terms of like sexual terms. You'll find some terms that combine different ones. So there's like platonic romantic is a term. You can look into that. A lot of people relate to the definition of platonic romantic and they don't really understand that because they never heard that term. So again, it can be helpful just to look into different labels. There are a metric frick ton of different romantic labels. Some people say that there's more romantic labels than sexual labels, and I honestly would not be surprised. I really wouldn't. There are a lot. So, again, it's okay to do that. Just go out, look, and pretty much almost all the ones I've listed can be converted into romantic. Demi, gray, fray, QPO, hetero, homo, pan, poly, demi. Did I say demi? Any kind of sexual attraction I have listed can be converted into romantic attraction. And for the most part, it can also be converted into the other types of attractions as well. You can have like demi-platonic attraction if you feel that that's how you experience that. You can use that as a label. You can still use those prefixes to like help describe specifically how you get to feeling that attraction and how you feel that attraction. Don't have to. There's no requirement. Sometimes it's simpler for people to just say, I experience physical attraction, period, rather than have like the whole explanation why. But sometimes it is helpful for people to look at it that way and be like, oh, I feel physical attraction if I like get to know the person first, in the case of like Demi. And that's fine. It's all fine. So this has been a video covering a lot of the different like models and ideas. Not a lot of the different models. We covered one model in terms of the different types of attraction and how, while they can overlap with some people, they don't always have to overlap with everybody, and how it can be helpful to go through these different types of attraction just to understand oneself better and kind of understand and experience. And sometimes, on some level, I think it's interesting to go through. Like, specifically for myself, it's been interesting to kind of accept that not everything has to be sexual or romantic, which is a mentality I've had for a long time. I feel that's kind of the mentality I was raised into having. And I don't know, it's very nice to know that, hey, it's okay to feel physical attraction to someone or platonic attraction to someone and still want to be there, still maybe want to have like a certain kind of relationship with them, and it doesn't have to be romantic. Especially if you communicate with that person and that person is very open-minded, you can pretty much work out like any kind of relationship you want to based on how you guys experience your attractions and how you want to balance that kind of relationship. So I think this is helpful information. As always, you can correct me below if you think I said something wrong or include your own opinions on these kinds of topics. I'll be back next week, hopefully, and see you all next time. Goodbye.